So next question that I had was the idea of using intervals and emotions for writing ideas. All right, so one of the very first videos I ever did on YouTube was a video called like musical intervals and emotions or something like that. It's one of my most popular videos, more popular, I should say most, but more popular videos. And the idea is, it's a very simple concept that certain intervals have certain connotations. So like the minor second. It's the very famous Jaws interval, right? It's very ominous, very kind of threatening. But then on the other hand, we have something like the minor sixth interval, which is very famous from Star Wars and the Force theme and Leia's theme. It's a very kind of sad, heavy, emotional interval. And I'm not going to go through all of them right now. If you want to, check out my video on intervals and emotions. It's a very old video. I think it's like 4 years old at this point. But the question I got was, awesome. All right, cool. We've got intervals, but how do we actually apply this to writing music? Is it applicable to writing music? So you don't want to get bogged down on interval by interval by interval. Instead, there are 3 useful strategies I can recommend for applying this. So the first one is to use an interval or 2 for what I like to call timbre-based motifs. All right, so timbre-based motifs focus primarily on intervals and instrumentation to create a motif, rhythm playing a lesser role. All right, so typically most melodic motifs are what we call pitch and rhythm motifs. This idea where you combine both pitch and rhythm as the primary building blocks for writing an idea. So if we were to go, all right, that's the Hobbit's theme from Lord of the Rings. You're using both pitch and rhythm to create a sense of identity. However, a timbre-based motif uses something like a specific interval and an instrumentation and its playing style. So for example, that's another motif. It's a minor third played on French horns that gets louder and then quieter. That's the famous Batman motif from Hans Zimmer's Batman trilogy, all right, where he doesn't use rhythm. There's not this idea like, there's not like this idea of multiple pitches and multiple rhythms. 1 or 2 intervals are all that's needed with an interesting way of playing them. It's called a timbre-based motif. So one of the cool things you can do with these intervals is you can say, all right, awesome. I really like the idea of the minor sixth. So you come back down. You just focus on that one interval. Or maybe you just add 1 or 2. And maybe that's what you like to work with. So that would be the first one. I would say use an interval or 2 for timbre-based motif. All right, pick 1 or 2 intervals that you really like, that you just really like the way they sound played together, and then find an interesting way to play them. For example, you could do the opposite. We start loud and then get quiet. You could do all kinds of things with it, but the idea of a timbre-based motif is pick 1 or 2 intervals you like and just find an interesting way to play them. You're great, and then you can build a theme from that. The same way you would with a regular motif, or I should say a pitch and rhythm motif. So the next strategy that I talked about that I want to bring up is the idea of using intervals to shape a basic melody. So some of you know that I have a general strategy where I will start with a chord progression. All right, so then some way that you could try to create a melody on top of this is to simply use for what is called a target tone. Target tones are important notes in a melody that are usually taken from the underlying chords. So what we could just do is say, all right, let's just pick some notes from underneath. So let's say C and E work well. Then we'll say F sharp and D. And then we'll do F natural, C, and then E and B. So then we've got a very basic melody. All right, so we've got a basic idea. This is called this is basically like a structure for your melody. These are target tones, so then we would just go through and we would just find ways to embellish it. So let's say we want to do it a little bit more stepwise motion. then we'll do a leap. And so we've got a nice motif here. And then we can just create some new ideas. And this is a very simple kind of approach to creating melodies. And so the basic principle is just this idea that you have the chords underneath and you start with your target tones, which are those notes taken directly from the chords. And then you just find ways to embellish it. You play around with it. You can improvise if that's what you like to do, and find a way to make it turn into a melody that you like. So the way you can do this without chords, and you can just use the intervals, we can still go with that basic idea. Start with a couple intervals you like. So let's say I like the that minor sixth. All right, then ignore this interval. Let's just find another one we like. Let's do G, and let's go down to D, all right, a perfect fourth. So we've got... So I've got an interval that I like. I've got this sense of longing. I have a way of just coming back down with a perfect fourth, which is a fairly neutral concept. And then our interval. And then let's say I want to create something even more dramatic. So we'll do E to C. We'll do, well, that'd be another minor sixth. So let's just do another minor sixth. And that's another way that you can use these intervals to create something, is use interesting intervals to flesh out the target tones of your melody. All right, so you could use this as a way to kind of use the same strategy I talked about. Create with initial tones, and then we'll say that's tritone, so let's do G. And then you can just find a way to embellish this without a chord progression. I tend to default to dotted rhythms for some reason. And we can just embellish it a bit, find something that works. That sounds like a decent idea, so let's flesh that out. And of course, it's just a very basic idea. But is all of this making sense? Anyone have any questions so far? I should be asking that more often. And the third strategy we want to talk about is using... Use interesting intervals to create a chord progression. All right, so once again, one of my favorite intervals is this major sixth, or minor sixth. So let's do... So if you find out that you just really like this interval, then there are a lot of different things you can do. You can try to find different chords that contain the chords. So we could say maybe F major or to A minor. You could do that. And of course, some people might point out that this is not proper voice leading, to which I will point out, cool, but voice leading, while useful, is technically just a suggestion. It's not necessary in every genre. In particular, cinematic music, film soundtracks, video game soundtracks, things like that, often will ignore common voice leading if it gives them the sound that they like. And so if I like this sound, awesome, go for it. Voice leading is not a law. Another one that we could do if we like this minor sixth is I could say, let's do C major. And then let's just do to D minor, which again, terrible voice leading, but might give you the kind of effect that you're looking for. Or if you wanted to, we could, of course, always actually play it with voice led, which this technically would not be voice led properly. We bring this up, which would kind of negate the whole kind of effect that we were looking for. But that's fine too. It doesn't have to, just because you start with an idea, just because you like the idea of using a minor sixth, doesn't mean that you should stick to that constantly. If you can always use inspiration as a springboard. If you started out thinking, I like this idea, but along the way, while using and experimenting with that idea, you came across this idea, which you liked better, or maybe you could do a major instead of a minor. If you like that better, cool. Don't limit yourself to your first idea. That makes sense? Any questions?